is of absolutely no avail. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. Okay, so we got the italics again. That whole thing gets highlighted. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reason yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. For me, it was a day ago. We are without defense against the first drink. So next to that, we're going to write, war stories don't work at meetings. War stories don't work at meetings. Give vision of hope. War stories don't work at meetings. Give vision of hope. Right? I'm in a first step meeting, and everybody's giving me a drunk-a-log and telling me, well, this and this and this and this, right? I'm just getting more depressed. When I'm in a first step meeting, you can tell me, a little bit about what it was like, but what I want to hear is that you have a solution, that I've got a reason to come back, that my life is going to get better. So, gol darn it, we don't want to give long drunk-a-logs at first step meetings. We want to give these people a vision of hope so that they come back, that they think, you know what, I think these people have something there. I'm going to come back and I'm going to see if maybe it'll work for me too, right? So none of these long drunk-a-logs that you hear people doing. For we are without defense against the first drink. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted. Underline the next two lines. With the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. Next to that, right, we can't. We can't. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. Right? I think that's where I was supposed to tell my barbell story. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Okay, so let's highlight this whole paragraph. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? So next to that, we're going to write, ask newcomer if they have experienced this. Ask newcomer if they have experienced this. Remember, Bill saw early on the importance of identification. When he went out and met Dr. Bob in Akron, Bill wasn't talking about Dr. Bob's drinking. Bill was talking about Bill's drinking, and Dr. Bob could relate to that, right? And then Bill talked about how he affected the recovery. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual, highlight the next three lines. With alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and underline that especially, beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. Okay, so next to beyond human aid, we're going to write fellowship made of humans. Fellowship is made of humans. And you know what? These humans can absolutely support me and help me and catch me when I fall. But we're going to write need psychic change. Fellowship made of humans, we need psychic change. And those are the two powers, and if we can get them both, if we can get both of those powers, we will recover. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. Highlight that. So many want to stop but cannot. And after cannot, in parentheses, write not willing. Not willing. I see that all the time. Oh man, I got to stop drinking. I really want to stop drinking. All right, let's meet Sunday morning at 7:30 and we're going to start going through the book. Well, I don't know if I want to stop that much, right? Not willing. Underline the next 4 lines. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride. Above that, write 4. That's step 4. The confession of shortcomings. Above that, write 5, which the process requires, right? There's the word, suggestions, but here they're telling us it's required for its successful consummation. Above successful consummation, we're going to write 8 and 9. 8 and 9. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom, underline, the problem had been solved, somewhere in there, write step 2, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools, circle simple kit of spiritual tools, and write 3 through 12. 3 through 12, laid at our feet. And then we're going to highlight the next 3 lines. We have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Next to that, we're going to write promise of spiritual experience. There's promises scattered throughout this whole book. They're not only the ones that we read at meetings. This is a good one. We have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. We got to do the next whole paragraph. This is important stuff. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Okay, highlight the whole paragraph, but we're going to stop at experiences there. And next to that, we're going to write page 567. Right next to experiences, write page 567. Now, at the bottom of the page, it says, fully explained appendix 2, right? So they really want us to read it because on page 27, you don't need to write this, but on page 27, it's going to say, for amplification, please see appendix 2. And then on page 47, it's going to say, please read appendix 2. So they really want us to read it. So let's go to appendix 2, which is 567 in the 4th edition, and I believe 569 in the 3rd edition. I know it's within a page or two.
569 to the 3rd.
Yeah, okay, but we're on 567. So, at the top of the page, let's write, when we develop spiritual ears and eyes. When we develop spiritual ears and eyes. And we can write spiritual experience, arrow, suddenly and quickly. Spiritual awakening, arrow, slowly. When we develop spiritual ears and eyes, spiritual experience, suddenly and quickly. Spiritual awakening, slowly. Right?
Spiritual what?
Spiritual experience is suddenly and quickly. Spiritual awakening is slowly. Now we're going to circle every time we see something that kind of means change or the word change. I'm going to have you guys circle it. And you don't need to write this, but I'm going to tell you my experience and everybody I've seen. When we wake up spiritually, we're no longer thirsty. When we wake, we develop these spiritual ears and eyes. They're talking about we lose our thirst for alcohol, right? So spiritually awakened people, they don't want to drink. Spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the circle personality change, circle that word, sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism, has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, circle that, or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Circle spectacular upheaval. To do that is to change something. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. After erroneous, right equals not true. It isn't true that we've got to have that white light experience that Bill had. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes, circle that, are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must, circle must, acquire an immediate and overwhelming, circle overwhelming, that means to change, God consciousness followed at once by a vast change, circle that, in feeling and outlook. Remember, when Bill was in the hospital, he felt the cool, clean wind of the mountain blowing through him, and he had the white light experience, right? They're saying that most of us aren't going to get that. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, circle transformations, that means to change, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls, highlight to the word time, calls the educational variety because they develop slowly over a period of time. So right next to that, after the right, work through working the steps. And again, if you miss something, just get online and you can get all the notes that you missed. Slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference, circle the word difference, long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has, underlined to the word change, he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. So again, circle the word change, go up one more and circle the word alteration. And then next to that, right, happens slowly. Happens slowly. Right? And one of the things I'm going to want you guys to do is when you get home tonight is to reread this without me interrupting all the time. Could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource. Okay? Underline inner resource, which they presently identify with, underline, their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly, circle the word honestly, facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. Okay, underline the next sentence. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. That was me for years. You guys, this is ridiculous. This isn't going to work for me. You are crazy people. I'll go to meetings because I can stay sober, but I'm sure as hell not going to do that crap. You got to be kidding me, right? That's the way I thought. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Underline, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. Okay, so write H-O-W next, or right under there, H-O-W, and then write, if I do this, I remain teachable. If I do this, I remain teachable. So, you don't need to write this, but, when Bill only changed one word in the 12 steps, only one word. Remember, Bill had that great experience in the town's hospital. So in the 12th step, he said, having had a spiritual experience, right? He got all these letters written into that little office in New York, and they said, Bill, we're doing what you did, and none of us, we're not having that white light experience. What are we doing wrong? We're doing something wrong, right? And Bill realized that he needed to change that word experience to awakening. So it's now, from the second printing on, it's having had a spiritual awakening as the result. But in the first printing, it was experience, right? That's the only word that he's ever changed since the 12 steps were put down on paper. So we're gonna highlight this last little thing too. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Okay, so we're going to write a few more things. Let's write underneath there, write HOW equals honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Whenever you get somebody saying the how of the program, it's honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. You know, somebody, I heard this speaker, and he said, whenever, because I'm a salesman, I deal with a lot of clients, and, a lot of times I'll start to get, pissed off, for lack of a better word, right? This person said, well, whenever you start to feel, some fear or you get angry like that, I want you just for the hell of it, just think to yourself, is it possible that I'm wrong in this situation? And ever since I started doing that, it's like 100% of the time when I'm feeling angry, I'm the one who's wrong. Right? So, now when I start to feel weird, it's like, is it possible that I'm wrong? I asked myself that with an open mind. So we've got to be honest, we've got to be open-minded, and we've got to be willing to do it. Now let's translate, by the way, Herbert Spencer, you can write 19th century social philosopher. 19th century social philosopher. I'm going to give you the layman's translation of contempt prior to investigation. Must try stuff before you say you don't like or don't believe. Must try stuff before you say you don't like or you don't believe. And I don't know how I knew it, but I knew that these 12 steps weren't going to work for me. It kept me drinking for years. Must try stuff before you say you don't like it or don't believe it. So you don't need to write this, but we come here, don't write this as a matter of fact. We come here, we are restless, irritable, and discontented. We are full of guilt, shame, and remorse based on stuff that we have done. We are running only on selfishness and self-centeredness. Now when we go from that to somebody who's got peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, and the willingness to help other people, that is an entire change in the way we think. Right? That's what they call a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. And Dr. Silkworth called that the psychic change. And that's what we get. That's what this is all about. So we're not going to have any kind of weird religious thing, right? This is all about spirituality, about being honest with what's going on, about being open-minded, and about being willing to try these actions. So let's go back to, where did I mark it? Back to page 25. Back to page 25. Have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. Right? I came in here to quit drinking, and I discovered that just about everything I thought was wrong. And I do not. I look at everything differently today than I did 5.5 years ago. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. And that whole paragraph should have been highlighted if I didn't say that. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there, underline, is no middle-of-the-road solution. Next to that, write no half measures. No half measures. I'll talk about that a little bit if we got time. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is, highlight to the end of the page, through which there is no return through human aid, there it is again, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. Okay, so next to that, write step one. It's choice one, step one, remain powerless. You can write choice one, step one, remain powerless. Two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. That's our first choice. And the other, put a little 2, to accept spiritual help. And under that, write step 2. Step 2. And then off to the right, we're going to write insanity, death, prison. That's also step 1, right? That's going on to the bitter end. Blotting out the consciousness of our insanity, death, prison is what we get there. The other ones, I like the other one. I like door number 2, accept spiritual help. That's step 2. My great plan was, at the end, I was going to cash out my 401k. I was going to drink and drug, and when it was gone, I was going to kill myself. That was my remain powerless plan. I was going through door number 1. This underline, I'm sorry, keep underlining. We did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. After make the effort, write take action, work steps. Take action, work steps. And at the top of the page, let's write, we do not learn easily. That's how we are wired. Alcoholics, for some reason, are kind of set in our ways, right? We do not learn easily. That's how we are wired. Many of us have to be near death, right? I mean, we all reach our bottoms. For some of it's emotional bottoms. Hopefully bottoms are coming up because people know about Alcoholics Anonymous. But some of us poor saps have to be near death before we choose step 2. So make the effort, take action, work steps. A certain American businessman, next to that write Roland Hazard. There's our friend Roland Hazard, Hazzard. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. Sounds like a great guy. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. Right? That is there's a lot of disparities in this. There's a lot of paradoxes in this program. That's one of them. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. So next to that, let's write Dr. Young, 1 day a week for a year. He didn't go to a 30-day program. And he's in the spa, so he's getting all kinds of other stuff the other 6 days, but 1 day a week for a year, he was with a psychiatrist, Dr. Young. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired, underline the next 2 lines, such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. So next to that, we're going to write self-knowledge avails us nothing. Self-knowledge avails us nothing. Such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he's there for a year, right? He's finishing up. Ha ha! This time I got it. Well, you know what? He got drunk on the way to the boat. He didn't even make it back to the boat. So he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. Highlight the next little line. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? So off to the left, we're going to write, we have to be willing to work with people. We have to be willing to work with people. Not sure why my sponsor had me write it there, but there it is. We have to be willing to work with people. So once we've gone through these steps and we've had that awakening and we're no longer thirsty, it is our job to go out and see if we can help the still sick and dying alcoholic. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he'd have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion, right? So, I mean, Dr. Young said, look, man, You're probably going to die. I don't see any hope for you whatsoever. He came from a very wealthy family. His family had sent him all over the U.S. to every psychiatrist he could go to every drying out facility. And Dr. Jung said, pay the gal on the way out. You're going to die. See you later. But this man still lives, and he is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster. Underline to the end of the paragraph, just the 2 lines, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Okay, so again, we're going to write will to do 12 steps and take action. Will to do 12 steps and take action. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, underline, is there no exception? So underline that. And we're going to write a few things. We're going to write, am I unique? And then we're going to write, being willing to practice principles is answer to question. Am I unique? Being willing to practice principles is answer to question. Each of the 12 steps has a principle assigned to it, and we're going to write those when we get to that point in the book. But being willing to practice principles is answer to the question. So there is exceptions, right? Yes. Highlight that word yes. Yes, replied the doctor, there is. And then underline the next sentence. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Next to that, write solutions. Solutions. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called, underline, vital spiritual experiences. So again, write page 567, 568, or if you're in the 3rd edition, 569 right there. Vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. He doesn't understand them. Dr. Jung does not understand them at all. They appear to be in the nature, underline the next 6 lines, in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of these lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. Okay, so next to that, again, write, bring body, mind will follow. Bring body, mind will follow. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful. Underline to the end of the paragraph. But I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Just that little line there. There it is. For amplification, see Appendix 2. So after your description, write hopeless. Hopeless. This guy's hopeless. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him, underlined at the end of the page, that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So we're going to write something. We're going to write, must have a relationship with higher power. Arrow, effort. Knowledge of God does not mean relationship. Must have a relationship with higher power. A little arrow. Effort. Knowledge of God does not mean relationship. Thought he had it there. Must have a relationship with higher power through effort. Knowledge of God does not mean relationship. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. So there were 3, now keep in mind, this guy his family they were industrialists. They were very, very wealthy. And they'd sent him everywhere, every sanitarium, every psychiatrist. And finally they wanted to go to the best in the world. So at that time there were 3 famous psychiatrists who were the best in the world. One of them was Sigmund Freud. The other one was Alfred Adler. And the third was Carl Jung. Okay? And they sent him to Sigmund Freud first, and Freud wasn't taking any more patients. Then they sent him over to see Alfred Adler, and Alfred Adler, we were told he was too busy. He was writing a paper, preparing some lectures. So he found his way to the third one, Dr. Jung. Now, Jung and Adler were students of Freud, and Dr. Jung broke from Adler and Freud on one thing and one thing only. Freud and Adler thought that every solution could be found in the mind only in the mind. Carl Jung thought that perhaps some people could be helped by spirituality. What a break we caught that he made it over to Carl Jung. If he'd have gone to Sigmund Freud, I'd be sitting here saying, I can't stop drinking because my mama set me on the potty sideways when I was 2. Right? We'd be analyzing ourselves instead of looking for the solution. So we caught a big break when he made it over to Jung. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. And when I'm looking for a sponsee, that's what I want to see. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. So, right by a design for living, write 12 steps. 12 steps. The distinguished American psychologist William James, underline William James in his book Varieties of Religious Experience. Bill Wilson read that book in the hospital, and I got to tell you, I bought that about a year ago. And, it's a great, if I cannot sleep, right, I get through one paragraph of that and I'm snoring. This book is very, very difficult. I have no idea how Bill was able to read this book in the hospital. In his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. Okay, highlight the next sentence. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. Right? We don't have a monopoly on that. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, underline, are the children of a living Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try, and circle willing and honest to boot. So next to that, let's write, must also listen. Must also listen, in parentheses, two-way street. Two-way street. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. Highlight the next 3 lines. This should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. So next to that we're going to write, don't care who God is, care that God is. Don't care who God is, care that God is. Don't care who God is, care that God is. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members, right? So many atheists and many agnostics are able to find the spirituality, right? Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to spiritual experience. So, we're all pretty proud of these steps. So real quickly, I'm gonna just tell you where did Bill Wilson get these steps from? Where did he get them from, right? It's good for our humility to see where they came from. Step number 1 came from the little doctor, Dr. Silkworth. He was a non-alcoholic fellow in New York who treated 50,000 alcoholics. He came up with the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. Step number 2, right, the solution. That came from Dr. Jung on the other side of the world. He said, Roland, the only way you're gonna get better is if you go find a spiritual experience. You go out and find one and you might recover. You might, right? So that went from Roland. Roland happened to be in Vermont at the same time Ebby Thatcher was there, stepped in front of the judge, and then Ebby ended up with Bill. I mean, that was a miracle. Step 2 came from a non-alcoholic doctor. Steps 3 through 12, they came from the Oxford group. They are a group of non-alcoholics practicing first century Christianity. And they didn't want to help the alcoholic. They wanted to go after the rich folk and have the rich folk talk about them, right? Didn't want anything to do with the low-bottom drunks. So Dr. Silkworth didn't have the solution or the program of action. Carl Jung did not know the problem, nor did he know the practical program of action to get the solution. The Oxford groupers did not know the problem. They did not know the solution. They just had a simple program of action to live by. And all of this gelled in the mind of Bill Wilson. And I got to think that God must have got tired of watching us alcoholics die. And he put all of that stuff in the mind of Bill Wilson. Before the 1930s, like Carl Jung said, here and there, once in a while, some alcoholics have had vital spiritual experiences and recovered. You've got a better chance of getting hit by lightning, right? Today, in these rooms, here and now, every single time an alcoholic will apply these things to their lives, they can recover, right? And they call that Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a wholesale miracle that has happened, and we get to participate in it. Absolutely a miracle. In AA, so many people, you hear them say, by the grace of God, or because of God as I understand Him, or because of this power greater than I have not found it necessary to take a drink in X number of days, weeks, months, or years. We hear this over and over and over. So hopefully we agnostics and atheists are going to start to believe that maybe there is something at work here, right? There's got to be something at work. No great obstacle to spiritual experience. Further on, underline, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recover. Just that little thing, and write 12 steps next to that. They're going to tell us exactly what they did. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. After that, write stories. Right? Remember the program of identification. Each individual in the personal story describes in his own language and from his own point of view, highlight from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. Just that little line there. Okay, next to it, write, form relationship with God by working the steps. Form relationship with God by working the steps. That's one way. That's the way I did it. Form relationship with God by working the steps. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, highlight, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. Okay, so we're gonna write a few things here, but you know what happened over time is people discovered that they could get days sober by going to lots of meetings. They discovered that, right? Now the first 100 people, they didn't have all these meetings. So when people came in and said, I'm not going to do these steps, all they could do was say, go out and drink some more. Come back when you're willing, right? But as people discovered that they could use meetings to stay sober, right, we started to mark success by the number of days, weeks, months, and years that we've gone without taking a drink, rather than by the way that we live our lives, rather than by, what's going on. I mean, that is ridiculous, right? So, I mean, we've all seen people, right? I've seen people come in they're 6 months sober. They're right off the bat, they got a good sponsor. They worked the steps. They had the spiritual experience. They're laughing. They're working for AA. They're having a great time. They are a delight to be around, right? Then we got people that are sober 10, 12, 14 years. They've treated this program like a cafeteria. They've taken only what they want and they've left the rest. These people are better than they were, but you never know how they're going to show up, right? They're a yo-yo. Some days they're okay, other days they're not, right? I'm not going to do that. I ain't going to do that. Then we got people that have been sober for 30 years, right? Never worked a step in their life and they are proud of that, right? These are the guys that say, if you go to any length, you know, and these guys, they feel so bad, I want to buy them a drink, right? So only those who have had a spiritual experience can help another have that experience, right? So problem drinkers who are sentenced to AA by the judge, they come in here, they don't have to work the steps, they go to meetings and they stop drinking. They're problem drinkers, they're not alcoholics. What happens when they sponsor somebody who's a real alcoholic? They haven't done the work, they haven't had the awakening. The only thing they can do is say, go to more meetings, play sober softball, show up early and set the chairs up. They can't take the people through the steps, right? So that's a big danger. I mean, we got to make sure that if we get a sponsor, that we've got one who's a real alcoholic that's worked the steps. Now, Bill knows that people are not going to like this God business. Bill didn't like it. I didn't like it. So the very next chapter, more about alcoholism, that's going to tell us what's going to happen to us if we do not accept the spiritual experience. My first sponsor, right, we were both sober for 9 months, and he was 25 years younger than I was, and they assigned me to him in the Code Blue. I was going nuts. I was ready to drink. And they assigned me, and I said, what do you mean? This guy is a kid. He's been sober less than me. He's not my sponsor. But he had the experience, and I hadn't, right? So he was able to guide me through the steps, and it worked, and it worked. And that's what this little thing is right here, right? This is the solution. We've got the older members. We got the new member in the middle, right? And the older members are going to support the new member, and they are going to help the new member go through this work. The fellowship is going to support us while the new member believes, becomes willing, does the work, investigates, does the steps, has the awakening, and all of a sudden this person becomes an older member. So Paris, my first sponsor, was an older member, even though he was 25 years younger than me, and sober maybe a couple weeks less than me. He was an older member and I wasn't, and he was able to help me. So we're going to, really quick, we're going to write homework. So at the bottom of page 29, write homework. We got it up there. We're going to do the first thing we're going to do. Number one, this is very important. Number one, ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? Ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? I asked like 3 people in AA. I asked a holy roller that I work with. He just goes to church all the time. And then I asked my sister. Ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? Number 2, I want you to, and I'll show you what that looks like this. I want you to take a sheet of paper, and on one side write God is, on the other write God isn't. Draw a line down the middle. And over here, just write some things that you think God is or that you'd like God to be. And then over here, let's have you write some things that you don't think God is. So, right down the middle. God is on one side, God isn't on the other. Just what you think, right? Don't have to be extravagant. And then number 3, 5 things you're grateful for in the last week. 5 things you're grateful for in the last week. You know, and also, too, I mean, when you get home, I'd like you to reread Appendix 2. So ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? 2, do the God is, God isn't deal. And 3, 5 things you are grateful for in the last week. And I've got it up here on the board, 1, 2, 3, if you don't got it. And we are right at 8 o'clock, so we're going to end with the third step prayer. Third step prayer on page 63. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace. And funny enough, these steps, if you're an alcoholic, they work. If you're a drug addict, they work. If you're a gambler, they work. If your life's crumbling, they work. Al-Anon used them until the mid-60s. I think they used the very same steps till they wrote their own.